Hello everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Victoria Murphy and I am the chair of the Democratic Party here in Santa Fe County. Thank you very much for coming. I would like for us to start off, if everybody will stand, then if you'll please remove your hats. And Councilor Goldenmeyer, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Are you going to do exercise? Right now we're going to do just three. So how we're going to do our forum is in the same way we have done our past 5 forums. So we will have, all of our candidates will open up with a 3-minute opening statement. We will give them questions. We will alternate who is first, second, and third. We will have 2 minutes to answer the questions. The questions must come written on paper. We have all of the cards up here, so if you want to ask any questions, please write them down. Make sure that they are questions for all of the candidates. You do not want questions that are specific to any one particular candidate. You can hand any of the questions to our wonderful Vice Chair, Willie Marcus. Willie will bring them up. I can tell you already we've gotten some duplicate questions, so we'll be going through those. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. And Jeff, if you'll get started, please.
Okay.
I don't think it's on yet.
There we go.
There you go.
Good evening, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank the Democratic Party here in Santa Fe County for having this forum here this evening. And thank all my supporters that are here. I'm Jeff Varela. I was born and raised here in Santa Fe, and I'm born and raised here in District 48. I was educated in the Catholic and parochial schools here in Santa Fe and also in the Santa Fe Public Schools. I graduated from Santa Fe High in 1979. Some of my classmates are here this evening. Hope I can do a good performance for you. After high school, I went into the United States Marine Corps, where I was a non-commissioned officer, and I was honorably discharged in 1982. And then I went to school here in Santa Fe at Santa Fe Community College and got my business degree, my associate's degree in business administration. I'm a product of state government, 25 years. Worked in state government in a number of capacities. I was an agency director. Well, first of all, let me start from how I climbed the ladder. I started, and I told the folks in the Central Labor Council next door, that I started as a maintenance worker with the Supreme Court building downtown just to get my foot in the door while I was going to college in the evening. And that's when Santa Fe Community College, at least a permanent campus that exists now, didn't exist. We were scattered all over Santa Fe. So I was going to school, working temporary, and fortunately I applied for an accounting job, and I started off as an accounting technician with the Supreme Court, Administrative Office of the Courts. So I progressed in my career and quickly discovered that accounting wasn't my bag. So I went into Human Resource Administration and I excelled there. And when I climbed the ladder, I don't forget the people that I met and I worked with along the way, friends, family, colleagues. So state government was good for me. The pinnacle of my career was State Personnel Director under Governor Richardson during his first term. I retired in 2007 from the Administrative Office of the Courts, where I was the Deputy Director. Currently, I'm a part-time instructor at New Mexico State's campus in Albuquerque. And I also do management consultant, and in my instruction job at the college, I conduct courses in human resource and personnel administration. I'm also a registered high school baseball umpire here in New Mexico. In fact, I'm delighted to say that last night I was assigned the first round of the state tournament in Albuquerque this Friday and Saturday. My father is here this evening. You guys are here, Dad? Representative Varela. My wife Annette and my 2 children are here, Christina and Camille. And I'm running for this office, folks, because I believe in the traditions, in the traditional families, and the traditional values in Santa Fe. And I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Paul Campos. I'm a candidate for State Representative District 48, and I want to thank all of you for being here today. Without you being here, democracy does not work. And if democracy does not work, we have a failed state. So thank you for coming here. I'm a former Santa Fe County Commissioner. That's where I got started in political activity and action. I served from 2001 to 2008. I want to start by telling you a little bit about what I think we need to do here in New Mexico. We have a serious problem. Is the mic okay, guys? Okay. New Mexico is in a deep economic recession. We're losing population. We have one of the worst unemployment rates in the whole country. Our educational system is failing us. We need to rebuild New Mexico. We need to do a lot of work here, and we have to do this together because we're family here. We're Democrats. We know that. After the 2000 recession, New Mexico has not recovered. Texas did. Colorado's doing really well, and Arizona has recovered, but we haven't. We need strong leadership that knows how to get big things done, and that's what I'm offering to you. This should not be a popularity contest, and it should not be a contest about the past. The past is the past. We're here to talk about the future, where we go today. My dad used to always tell me that good ideas are a dime a dozen. They're all over. And what matters is what you do with a good idea. Can you really get it done? And that's what I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. As a county commissioner, I led the effort to create the Buckman diversion. It is a $240 million project that brings millions of gallons of water into Santa Fe, the city, and the county. It has made us one of the most water sustainable cities in the Southwest, and as a result, some of our aquifers are recharging. This is a huge thing for our community and a very important issue concerning water security, because New Mexico is not water secure. Also, with the fracking industry, when the oil and gas people came to New Mexico, they wanted to frack here in Santa Fe. I said, wait a minute. We passed a moratorium saying you can't frack. You can't do it. And then, a year later, we passed a law regulating fracking. Fracking would have been disaster for our water supply. It contaminates water. It uses tons of water. It mixes water with chemicals that stay under the ground and can migrate and move to good aquifers and contaminate them. So it was a huge issue for our community. My time is up, so we'll continue this later. Thank you so much.
Are there any Democrats in the house? Come on, guys, let's lift it up. That's right.
You're a Democrat?
I am a Democrat. I'm a progressive Democrat. My name's Linda Trujillo, and I'm running for House of Representative for District 48. I grew up in a family where we basically lived from paycheck to paycheck. And my dad was a truck driver. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. One of the things that I had to do before I could drive a car, my dad made me learn how to change a tire, and he made me learn how to check for the oil. So education was just not a priority. So as I was raising my family, I have 5 children, they're grown, and if you think you feel old, wait until your youngest of 5 turns 30. My baby will turn 30 in a couple of weeks. I'm still trying to deal with that. So I didn't have much opportunity to support my family, and that was because all I had was a high school education. So I needed to get some credits in early childhood in order to expand my child care center. So I went to school. I went to a community college, and I discovered that learning was fun and that I actually had the capacity to learn. I wasn't a very good student in K through 12. It was really difficult for me. I went on to get my bachelor's degree in public administration, and one of my professors asked me, she suggested that I go on to law school. I didn't think I had that capacity, but she helped me study for it,
and a year and a half later, I was in law school. I'm now a licensed attorney in the state of New Mexico, and I'm passionate about education because education changed my life. It helped me break the cycle of poverty for my family. I still have a $1 food stamp that I carry around, and I carry that in my purse every day to help remind me of the struggles that I've been through and how important the philosophies and the programs that we as Democrats support, food stamps, health care, education. We support those things because we know that they help change people's lives. I'd like to introduce my husband, Fabian, who's been my keeper for the last 6 months, trying to keep me on task. I'm running because I want to continue advocating for education. But there's other things that I want to advocate for. I want to advocate for the environment. I want to advocate for jobs. There's a lot of things that we can do, and I think we'll have an opportunity to answer some of those questions. But I also want to advocate for women's rights. Equal pay for equal work. It's about time that women made $1 for every dollar that a man makes instead of 70 cents. We need to protect our constitutional right to make our own health care decisions. I'm happy to say that I've been endorsed by Planned Parenthood. I will tell you more as the time goes on because Francesca has just said my time is up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for those opening statements. So the order we're going in next is going to be Linda, Jeff, Paul. And I'm going to ask that everybody hold their applause so that we can get through. We're getting quite a few questions here. So if you'll hold your applause till the very end of the evening. Thank you very much. So our first question. How is your Spanish?
My Spanish is not very well. As much as I tried, I'm telling you, we need to have dual language from the time a child is born. From the time a child is born. And what we see is that dual language in our schools has actually had a huge impact. I wish that I could absorb it, but it's been very difficult for me. And it's one of the things that I would like to be able to do, but for some reason my brain just doesn't pick it up. But I wholeheartedly support dual language. And again, we just had a presentation yesterday about El Camino Real. And our dual language students are actually performing better than our English-only students. And so we've decided to look into the possibility of turning El Camino Real into a magnet school specifically for dual language. That's how important it is in our community.
Okay, the next person will be Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. Más o menos, my español. On some days it's good and some days it's horrible. And I don't want to butcher my language, my native language. So I could use some improvement on Spanish. I'm glad to hear Linda Trujillo talk about dual learning and learning dual languages in our schools. It's important, especially here in New Mexico. I would even advocate languages for Native Americans. We're a multicultural state, so I strongly support dual learning and dual language efforts in our school. Thank you.
My first language is Spanish. I learned Spanish at home, and I really refused to learn English till I was in about the 4th grade. In fact, I was a bad student throughout my elementary years. I failed the 4th grade. I was kept back because of my language skills. So I'm proud to say that it is my native tongue, my first tongue. My mother and father spoke it at home. Hablo el español más o menos bien y puedo comunicar con cualquier persona en este cuarto en español. I think what Linda brought up too about dual track, very important. We're close to Mexico. We have an opportunity to develop a good, strong business relationship with Mexico. And if we don't, we're going to lose a great asset. We can increase trade, increase jobs. It's an opportunity that most states do not have. I think if we do this in our educational system, we will be a step up on other states. Thank you.
Okay, our next round, we are going with Paul first, Linda, and then to Jeff. With our budget vulnerable to oil and gas, what would you propose as other methods to stabilize our budget?
It's pretty clear that oil and gas revenues are going to be in decline in the future, and New Mexico is not going to be able to rely upon them. There is discussion that peak to gas is in decline. We're moving to a new energy economy with clean energy, and that's important to recognize, and New Mexico has to recognize that. We do have to look for new revenues. I would advocate one, let's look at our budget. Let's really look at our priorities. Is education our number one priority? If it is, let's look at programs that are no longer a priority for us, and let's take care of those. Let's rededicate the money. Let's look at our tax code. I think our tax code really prefers, or let's say gives a lot of benefits to big corporations, tax credits, subsidies. These are no longer benefiting public in New Mexico. We have to get rid of that. So we look at our budget, we look at our tax code, and we look at new revenue sources. I think we may want to look at recreational cannabis. I mean, look at what Colorado has done. They are funding their education system in a good and appropriate way. So let's look at that too. And if necessary, we're going to have to pay a little more in taxes. There's no question about that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so there's a couple of things that I think that we need to do. And in the same respect that we've invested in tourism in New Mexico, we need to invest in economic development. There was an interim jobs council report that's come out, and one of the things that they suggested, there's a list of about 8 to 10 suggestions for what we need to do to invest in economic development. The one at the top of the list was investing in broadband. We've only got about 64% of our community in New Mexico has access to broadband, and yet broadband is the key for many businesses to connect with the world. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Boston with my daughter. She flew in from Seattle to stay with me for a National School Board Association meeting. She's at the table. She's texting on her phone while we're eating lunch, and I asked her, "Are you working, sweetheart?" And she said, "Yes, Mom, I am. One of our web pages has gone down." She said, "But listen to this." She said, "The lady who I contract with is shopping in Target, and the person that she contracts with is on vacation in Argentina. We just got the website fixed in 5 minutes." That's the economies of the future. Businesses don't have to have a big box in order to function here. So we need to be looking at recruiting businesses to New Mexico. And the IT businesses are an incredible. I heard just last week that California is losing IT businesses. And the reason is because the cost in California is so high. They're looking for places to go. I also think that we need to invest in wind and solar. We've done that in the school district by applying solar paneling to our schools. We've got 9 schools right now. We're getting 6% of our electricity from the solar paneling. The other thing we need to do is we need to either lift the cap, get rid of the cap for the film industry, or we need to expand it significantly because it is bringing millions of dollars into our communities.
Okay, we're back to sorry.
It's okay, Madam Chair. You know, New Mexico is not an industrial state. We have a heavy dependency on oil and gas. And because of the roller coaster ride that oil and gas has done over the last 10, 12 years, New Mexico is hurting now. So I agree with my colleagues here, my opponents. You know, we've got to diversify our economy. And we can talk about, you know, giving tax credits, and this has been done before. You know, think of Google out in Moriarty. We gave them all kinds of tax incentives, and they didn't last very long in New Mexico. Folded up shop, 200 to 300 people out of jobs. So tax incentives by themselves are not going to solve the problem, folks. We need to invest in human capital. And what I mean by that is invest in our people. Invest in our local businesses. Here in Santa Fe, I've got at least 4 local business people that are endorsing my candidacy. And I talk to them. Those local businesses have been around Santa Fe for years. Local businesses hire people in sustainable jobs. The film industry is great. We need to put more money into it. But it's going to take time to mature. While it's maturing, what are we going to do about our economy here in New Mexico today? How are we going to take care of our people? And again, I keep saying this, invest in human capital. Invest in our colleges and universities. We obviously need to do something in education because in the Southwest region, New Mexico spends more per student than any other state, yet we're at almost in the bottom quartile. We are in the bottom quartile in performance. There's something wrong here. And I look at the state of Utah, and they invest less per student. And their performance, both from schools, teachers, and students, is in the top quartile. We need to start asking some hard questions over at the state legislature. Thank you.
Thank you, and we're going back, Jeff, to Paul, to Linda. On the subject of wages, a wage parity bill was signed by our governor in 2013, yet disputes are still an issue, and women are sometimes not paid the same wages as men for the same position. How would you deal with this?
Good question. When I was at state personnel during my first tenure in the state personnel office, I was the compensation administrator for state government. And if anybody had a good view, a front view of discrimination in pay for women, it was myself. But folks, we need to pay attention to pay issues for everybody. Women, Hispanics, Native Americans, you know, we're all suffering in some way or another in discrimination in pay. So it's a much broader issue than discriminatory pay for women. We need to fix this issue for all people and all minorities.
I think the issue is critical to our country. Equal pay must happen, and it must happen right away. What we do need is a strong governor, and we don't have a governor who's really interested in enforcing the law. If we had strong gubernatorial enforcement and regulation and interest in the issue, we would be a long way ahead of where we are today. The other avenue is litigation. We have to provide for a mechanism by which women can litigate and get attorney's fees and their court costs paid if they prevail on a wage discrimination lawsuit. This is so important to New Mexico. I have 2 daughters who are here today, and I want them to be treated just as well as any man all the time. Thank you.
I find it really interesting that we have a wage parity, and yet this administration has chosen to look at specifically IT jobs, which my experience in the state are mostly filled by men. So when I look, I worked it. Look, I worked at RLD. Jeff was at RLD. He knows. And when I was there, just the same as I am over at boards and at the state records and archives right now. When I came into the agency, women were paid the least. Not just small amounts. They were paid well below the amount. It's taken me a year and a half. Unfortunately, SPO has been cooperating with me until we had a budget downfall. Now I have to figure out how I'm going to keep these employees paid. But SPO has worked with me, and I have raised over half of the wages of the women in my agency. And the reason is because they were underpaid by as much as $5 an hour. So what we need to do, if we're really concerned about wage parity, is we need to look at where are women in state government. They're working in clerk positions predominantly. What are the clerk positions making? In some cases, they're making below the Santa Fe minimum wage. Are they the ones who are getting promoted? I think we need to do a full-blown study on this, because my experience has been that men are promoted faster, men are brought in at higher wages, and men get wage increases easier.
The next is we're going from Linda to Jeff to Paul.
Yeah. Basically, whoever ends up with the mic at the end,
Almost, yeah. Okay. What is the best way for New Mexico to establish educational equality for all of its children?
And invest, 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 invest. And I traveled around this state, and I got 10 school boards on board to sue the state. The state, under the Constitution, has a responsibility to sufficiently fund education. That means that is their priority. Now, we know that the Democrats in this community have advocated for education. It's the people outside of this community that have not cooperated. When you go to Boston and you find out that their students are getting funded to the degree of about $20,000 a year, in Santa Fe we get less than $5,000 per student. Santa Fe is second to the last in funding, and it's based upon size and it's based upon the students. So how do we have parity? We fund education equitably. That means that we need to change the SEG so that the risk factor is higher. It means that we need to invest the most in our students who are struggling the most. It means that we don't necessarily fund education equally, we fund it equitably. We need to have after-school programs for our youngsters so that they're not going home and spending time in front of the TV. We need to have before-school activities. We need to have summer programs. We know that our youngsters who are in first grade and they go on to summer programs where they don't have access to academic stimulation, they then fall behind. So as their higher income peers are moving forward because they're participating in things like horse camp and other things, they're going backwards because they don't have academically challenging. And there is research to show that that's the case. We need to invest in after school and summer programming and expand the K3+ program.
Thank you for the question. You know, working with my father at the legislature for the past 7 years and having lengthy discussions with my father on this subject, we're talking about funding public education, issues in public education, that we were talking about 20 years ago. We need to stop this madness. We need to do a reality check on how we fund public education here in New Mexico. You know, there's obviously, and Linda pointed out the needs out there. Well, we've got to stop this tug of war, is what I call it, because you've got so many fingers in the pie on public education, particularly at the state legislature. By the time the money gets to the classrooms and to the teachers, there's practically nothing left, because our approach to funding education through the funding formula is from the top down. So when the money goes to the school districts, in most cases, it's from the top down. We need to take it, again, stop for a moment and start looking at a bottom-up approach to funding education. Because administration, and I say it not only at the school district level, but at the public education department for the state, siphons out millions and billions of dollars that can be better used in the classrooms for the teachers and the students. So from a macro perspective, and I would be right on the front line if I get elected, we need to stop this madness about how we're funding public education today. And that means getting all the 89 school districts together on this. They need to be in the room for the discussion, including school board members. And we need to take a different approach, because remember what I said earlier, we spend more per student in this part of the country than any other state. Yet from an achievement standpoint, we're the bottom quartile. There's something wrong here, folks. Thank you.
Education, especially early education for children, is the key. Without that, we're never going to become a prosperous New Mexico. We're never going to attract the businesses. People don't want to come to New Mexico because our educational system is not to their standards. National graduation rates are 82%. In New Mexico, they're probably in the 60% rate. We have to do better. But early education is the key. We have to find the resources, either through cleaning up the tax code, looking at our priorities for the budget, looking at the land grant funds. We have to find money. for early education. For every dollar we spend in early education, the community gets $9 back long term because we have productive, educated citizens. This is what we have to start with, and this has to be our #1 priority. We have to stop with this flunking of third graders. Ridiculous. We have to stop with this grading of schools A through F and all this excessive testing. We're wasting millions of dollars on excessive testing. It's wrong. Our kids don't like it. Our teachers hate it. It's not right for New Mexico. It's wasting our money in ways that are inappropriate. But this Martinez administration is totally supportive of that. We have to get away from that. We have to have more money for our teachers. Our teachers have to be compensated as professionals. They are professionals. They are our most important professionals in our community. Thank you.
Okay, we'll be Paul, Linda, to Jeff. What first step would you take to get New Mexico out of the mental health crisis that we are in?
I think the question goes to Medicaid. What Martinez did when she became governor, she ended the contracts with a number of people here in New Mexico, a lot of companies that were providing counseling and mental health services. She cut that out, and she brought in a firm from Arizona. And that didn't work. We all know that. We know what happened. That Arizona firm is out of New Mexico. We have hurt our people who are the neediest. These people have a relationship with a counselor, and you disrupt that over and over again, you're hurting these people. What we need is a serious commitment from our governor, and maybe our next governor, to really be serious about these services for people in greatest need. We need a commitment from a governor, and we need to find a new governor soon. Thank you.
So under Governor Richardson, he actually did a lot to help build up the mental health services around the state. So if there's any place that we need to have incentives right now, we need to have incentives to bring mental health back to New Mexico. I have a friend who's had to send her son to Utah. And the reason that she had to send him to Utah to a boarding school there is because his mental health needs were not being met here. He's a child with autism, and he was really struggling in the school. And because his group of support was no longer available because of the mental health debacle that this governor has caused in our state, her and her husband decided to move their child to Utah. He's being serviced there very well. He's doing very well, but they want very badly to bring him back. So if there's any place that we would provide incentives, tax breaks, tax credits, economic development funding, the Economic Development Department's got $50 million. The legislature gave them that. They're struggling to get it out. And I could give you a number of reasons why that's happening, but it's happening from the governor's office down. That money needs to go out to mental health facilities now. We have individuals in our state who would be more than happy to reopen mental health facilities, but they're going to need the dollars to make that happen. Because within a period of just a few months, this governor, this administration decimated the mental health services in our community. We must take immediate action.
You know, I think my opponents have made it clear the problems we're having with this administration as far as mental health coverage in New Mexico. But let me say this. This is a problem that the legislature and the governor are going to have to deal with. I don't think we have a strategy in New Mexico to deal with mental health. You know, under Governor Richardson, I think that was a start of a strategy. And then it evaporated. So I agree with my opponents about bringing it back into New Mexico. But folks, that doesn't happen overnight. We need to quit politicizing this issue because it's hurting our people. If we're having to send our kids and our people out of state for mental health coverage and mental health treatment, then that says we've got to do something in New Mexico to start developing that care here in New Mexico. So we need a strategy. And that's going to take not only the governor, I don't think it's going to happen under this governor as far as leading or managing a strategy. But it's going to take the initiative of the executive and the legislature to come up with a strategy to deal with mental health. It's a big issue, in this, not only in New Mexico, but in this country. So we need an overall strategy to this approach. Thank you.
We'll go from Jeff, Paul to Linda. What changes are you recommending to the New Mexico tax code?
Good question, and I was hoping that this question would be asked because in New Mexico, over the time that I was in government, up to today, we've been taking kind of a Band-Aid approach to how our tax structure here in New Mexico. You know, one administration does this, another administration does that, and I think, you know, Bill Richardson was my boss, but I think he made a serious mistake by lowering the tax for higher income wage earners when he was in office, along with the food tax. You can't repeal the food tax now because it helps lower income people. That's gone. Folks, we got to deal with that. And our cities are hurting now because of the hold harmless. So monkeying around, band-aiding, taking a piecemeal approach to tax policy, it's been proven it's bad public policy. What we need to do in the legislature is come up with a tax strategy. Look at the entire tax code. I worked on a bill last legislative session with my father to take a look at those tax rebates, those tax credits, and I think we were looking at over $100 million just by repealing some of those. And we didn't target low-income people. We didn't target veterans. But looking at the others that have been on the books for years, some that we didn't even need, some that we even forgot about, we looked at generating at least over $100 million in revenue. And that's an indication to me from an entire tax structure policy. The legislature needs to come up with needs to take a comprehensive look at how we tax, and I'm talking property taxes, GRT, everything in New Mexico. Thank you.
Like so many things in New Mexico, we haven't looked at tax code in a long time. We really haven't paid serious attention to it. There are a lot of things in that code that need to be revisited and studied. We need to have a coherent plan that serves the public interest in our tax code. Too often we have piecemeal. Some legislator has some really bright idea, or some governor has a really bright idea, and they say, let's give somebody a tax break, a tax credit. It's all bits and pieces. It's not coherent. It's not well thought out. We need to review our tax code from the bottom to the top. Our strategy in the past as far as the tax code was, hey, we can bring big corporations into New Mexico if we give them enough tax credits, enough tax benefits, enough subsidies. Look at Intel in Rio Rancho. $2.6 billion of taxpayer money was used to bring them here and to keep them here. And now they're leaving here. Like so many other companies, they're hurting. I mean, they use so much of our water. I mean, so much of our water was committed to Intel. I mean, we sacrificed for Intel and they're leaving us. So that strategy of giving subsidies to these big businesses has failed. And we really have to look at that again. We're subsidizing huge corporations. Why? Are they benefiting the public interest? Are they advancing the public interest? This money that we could use in our coffers to fund education is being given away every single day. A failed strategy. Thank you.
So I had the pleasure, and some of my friends think that it probably wasn't a pleasure, but I really enjoyed it. I went to the Tax Institute last week, and I spent 2 days listening to tax and how tax works in New Mexico. And there's a couple of things that I learned that were really important to know. And you know, how many of you order off of Amazon? Yeah, there we go. We're losing consumption tax. And the reason we're losing consumption tax is because we don't pay taxes when we buy from Amazon. And so there's a national effort, and there has been a national effort that the Supreme Court has declined to take up, but they're going to have to do something. There's about 26 states that have adopted taxation on companies like Amazon. My son works for Amazon, so we order from Amazon. But we need to be getting those consumption taxes from that. Our taxes for consumptions have dropped significantly, and we don't really know exactly why, because with gas tax going down, with the cost of gas going down, typically retail spending would go up, but it hasn't gone up. And the theory is that it really has gone up. It's just that we don't notice it because so many of us are buying our products from the internet, and we're not paying taxes for those. So that's one thing that we need to do. I also agree that we need to close the corporate loopholes. But some of the things that have to be done is we have to stop this pyramiding with gross receipts tax. So my recommendation, what I would spearhead in the legislature, is I would spearhead a complete examination of all of our taxes, really looking at it from top to bottom and determining how do we get that consumption tax back? How do we make up for the loss in food tax? Voices for Children advocated against eliminating the food tax because it provides so much benefit to families. That's what I would do.
I got it.
You got it.
Hey, you guys are getting the hang of the...
Finally getting the hang of it.
So we've got Linda, Jeff, to Paul. There's quite a bit of background on here. Immigrants are approximately 10% of the state population, 12% of the workforce, 15% of small business. On average, immigrant households in New Mexico pay $728 in state taxes and $2,986 in federal taxes. At this time, the administration is withholding tax returns from immigrants who have been, and in this way, discouraging workers from paying taxes. How would you support our immigrant community?
That is a really good question. And what this governor is doing through tax and rev is an abomination. It is inappropriate. Our immigrant families are paying state taxes, they're paying federal taxes. Even the federal government recognizes that they should be getting back. Look, they don't get incentives for child care. They don't get tax credits for education. They don't get the luxury of those incentives and tax credits that you and I get. So we can't change the federal tax system, but we can help change the tax system here in New Mexico. And I would be a staunch advocate to ensure that a Secretary of Tax and Rev would not have the authority to make these kinds of decisions. If that's what it takes, it's unfortunate, but if it takes a law to ensure that our immigrant families are getting their refunds in a timely fashion, in the same respect that any other person in New Mexico gets it, I will advocate for changing that law. Our immigrant families are providing more into our tax base at a federal level and at a state level than you and I are. And the reason is because they don't get those credits that we get. And so the idea that they're not paying their fair share is malarkey. It is absolute malarkey. They are paying their fair share, and we have a responsibility to give them back what they have a right to without delay.
Thank you for the question. I think the issue on taxation of our immigrant population mushrooms into a much bigger issue, folks. It's called tax fairness for everybody. Okay? Because when I'm out there canvassing and knocking on doors and talking to people, there's people out there that, on the flip side, are advocating or saying that the immigrants aren't paying enough taxes. It's a two-sided issue. And I agree with Linda as far as we don't want to, it's a compassion issue on one point. We don't want to start discriminating against our immigrant population by imposing more taxes or unfair taxes. So when you look at this whole issue of taxation of our immigrant population, folks, it's a two-sided issue. It may be more sides than two, because it's really at the end of the day, it's really about tax fairness to all of us here in New Mexico. Because if immigrants are going to be required to pay taxes, and they're going to get the tax credits that we get, as citizens. That's a fairness issue. So this is a much bigger issue. And we need the expertise and we need the vigor in the legislature to take it on and quit making statements or proposing legislation that's politically popular to deal with it. Because I've seen that working with my father at the legislature. They create legislation that's politically popular with the immigrant population or maybe politically popular against the immigrant population. Thank you.
I think this is a pretty straightforward issue. We have a governor who's stealing money from people. It's their money. They should have it. And if it takes a law, let's do it. Thank you.
So it'll be Paul, Linda, to Jeff. As a Democrat, do you support open primary elections?
No. I prefer the closed primary method. Thank you.
You know, as a Democrat, I would like to say that I support closed primaries. But what I've learned is that the states that have open primaries so that independents or those who don't declare can vote in a primary, there's actually very little difference. And so what I support is I support increasing voter participation. And there's ways that we can do that. We can help make our individuals who choose not to claim a party understand what their responsibility is. But yeah, I have come around to believe that having an open primary is not going to decimate the Democratic Party. I think it would actually increase our party.
Well, I guess this is an issue where I differ with my opponents because it's interesting enough, a couple of times I've been asked, well, Jeff, how come you don't put that you're a Democrat on your campaign literature? Folks, there's only Democrats running for this seat. It's clear that I'm a Democrat, but I'm an American first. And we talk a lot about why don't people participate in the political process anymore? What's turning people off? How do we get more people to the polls to vote? So here, if it works, and I say, I underscore if, I support an open primary process. If it's going to bring more participation in the political process and electing our elected officials or political officials, let's open up the process. Because folks, we get so tuned in and locked into party philosophy and party commitment and party loyalty, and I see this a lot. I've seen this a lot in my short time on this earth, my short time in politics. We're Americans first. So to get back to the question, Madam Chair, I support the open primary process.
Oh, back to Jeff, Paul, and Linda. There are 34 traditional communities in Santa Fe County, but only one in District 2, Agua Fria Village, with a 2010 census population of 2,865 people. What do you think the special needs of a traditional community are?
Thank you for the question. The village of Agua Fria has such historical value in Santa Fe that a lot of people that come to Santa Fe, or maybe some people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, some people don't really understand that. Don't really understand the historical value that the village of Agua Fria brings to Santa Fe from a cultural standpoint. I think first and foremost, when that portion of Agua Fria Village was incorporated in the city, there's still some infrastructure needs there that we need to address. And it's just hard for me to understand how the city and the county cannot get together on this and fix and address those infrastructure needs in Agua Fria Village. Those people need water, they need sewer service, and year after year after year, my father gets capital outlay requests. I process those for my father. And a lot of them come from Agua Fria Village. We need to take care of our people. Just because they're a traditional village outside this, for a number of years that was outside the city limits, they're kind of like the outskirts of Santa Fe, yet they're not part of Santa Fe. We gotta get rid of that mentality and take care of those infrastructure needs in the village of Agua Fria. Thank you.
As a county commissioner, we recognize Agua Fria as an independent village and as an important historical village in our community. Agua Fria has the same needs that everybody else does. They're essentially in the county. They have needs for infrastructure, for planning, for police protection. Every single issue that we're concerned about here in Santa Fe, they're concerned about in Agua Fria. Water is a huge issue for Agua Fria. They have their own company. Is that right, Mr. Nee? Yeah. They have their own company, and they all pay for the services of that water company. So they have taken steps to become independent and stand on their own. One issue that I think Agua Fria must think about, just like any other group of people that want to create a municipality. They do create a municipality for one purpose, to bring their resources together, tax each other so that they have money for those infrastructure needs. And I think maybe Agua Fria needs to consider that because it is very important that they are able to pay for all these important things. Thank you.
So one of the major things I think that we need to do for the village of Agua Fria is that we need to listen to them. And one of the first things that I had the pleasure of helping out on the school board was to defend the WPA building over on the Agua Fria school. That building, I listened to my community. I just live down the street from Agua Fria. It's within walking distance from where I live. And there was concerns that the building was not, it had been built over to the point that it could not be declared a historical building. And yet the WPA building itself was cherished by members of our community. It was cherished because their grandparents and their fathers had helped participate in the building of it. And so one of the things that I advocated for was that we not tear that building down, that we purchase land outside of where the Agua Fria school was, and that we build another school off of that site. El Camino Real is what came of that. We built a K-8 program outside of the village, and we let the village keep the name of Agua Fria Elementary in Agua Fria. And again, that was because I went and listened, and I asked what they would like to do, and then advocated for it. The Agua Fria Elementary site is now a real model of early learning for our community. I consider it to be a jewel of our community. The United Way has their administration offices there. We've got the NI program, the preschool program there, and we're expanding. And so being heard is what I think is most important for the village. And I do agree that they have a lot of infrastructure needs. And so those would be the things that I would support, but listening comes first.
The order will be Linda, Jeff, DePaul. What is your position on protecting women's reproductive rights?
I am happy to answer that. As I said earlier, I have been endorsed by Planned Parenthood, and I've been endorsed by them because I support a woman's right to choose. Medical decisions involving whether to keep a pregnancy going or to terminate a pregnancy are incredibly difficult and private decisions that should be made between a woman and her doctor and whoever else that woman would like to have in. I will advocate for and vehemently defend our right to make those decisions and our right to have access to reproductive health care. There have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 260 some bills to try to restrict, to try to make it more difficult, to take away funding. I don't see us stopping funding for Viagra, right? Women should have the right, we're grown adults, we should have the right to make our own healthcare decisions. I will fight for it.
Well, this sounds like a familiar question, right, Councilor Hildemeyer? I think we had a discussion on this earlier this year. You know, folks, being a traditional Catholic, this is an issue that I personally struggle with. I struggle with this issue. But again, I would be a state representative, and my constituency tells me to be pro-choice and to protect those rights for women that currently exist. I don't think there's going to continue to be bills to take away those rights. I'm not going to support those. Thank you.
The law has been clear in this country since 1973, Roe versus Wade. First 2 trimesters, it's a choice for a person, for a family, and their doctors. I strongly support that. I think that's the right thing to do. What we see in the country today is the Republican Party doing all kinds of things to limit that, requiring intrusive medical procedures like ultrasounds, and they require a woman to do that before they can have an abortion if they've decided to do that. That's wrong. These are personal decisions. What legislature has a right to say, hey, you're going to have an ultrasound and we're going to stick something inside your body and you're going to see the images of the baby? That's wrong. The other issue that the Republicans come up with, and I saw this at the last session, is what they call the late-term abortion. They want to talk about 20 weeks. That's wrong. You know, the Supreme Court said the first 2 trimesters are clearly protected. That's 26, 27 weeks. Statistics. Let's talk about the facts. In 2014, there were 4 so-called late-term abortions in New Mexico. And I'm sure these were very difficult decisions by women, families, and they were made by adults, and they were made by medical professionals. Thank you.
Okay, from Dr. Paul, Linda to Jeff. This state has a lot of needs. Our needs cost money, more than can be found with a few less trips to Starbucks. Where do you see room to improve efficiencies in state government?
Efficiencies in state government. Any bureaucracy can use improvements. We can always make it better. I think a problem that we have is, you know, we have a governor that comes and they're for 4 or 8 years and they do certain things. Another governor comes for 4 or 8 years and they do some things. But really, no one is taking a long view about our bureaucracy and how we can make it more efficient. I think we can. Could you repeat the question again, Vicki?
This state has a lot of needs. Our needs cost money, more than can be found with a few less trips to Starbucks. Where do you see room to improve efficiencies in state government?
One issue that's huge is criminal justice system. It's really important. We have too many people in jail, and it's costing us a hell of a lot of money. You know, we should have people who are dangerous in jail, but if they're not, they shouldn't be in jail. It's just costing us. We've created a huge bureaucracy, and if we could institute some criminal justice reform, we could save a lot of money and invest that in education and rehabilitation. Those are the things that we really need to think about. These are true investments of public monies.
Thank you.
So, whoever asked the question, I hope that I don't insult you, but our state employees have been asked to do more with less for too long. And we've passed the point where we can do more with less. And what we need to do is we need to invest and we need to grow the pie. We cannot keep asking our state employees to do 2, 3, 4, and 5 jobs and still get paid the same amount. So we need to invest in early learning. As my opponent said earlier, my numbers are for every $1, we reap back 8. And that is because we start stopping the cradle to prison pipeline. It costs us more to not invest in our youngsters and let them get into the prison system than to invest in them, have them on track, give them the services that they need early in life. It is much cheaper for us to invest in our young people than it is to wait until they are breaking the law because they don't have the resources, whether it's mental health. For too long, we have blamed our teachers for ineffective education. I don't think we have ineffective education. We have youngsters in our community, in our state, who are living in poverty. And because they live in poverty, they don't have access to the things that our higher income families have. You look at the statistics and you'll see that across the board, our middle and higher income children are performing very well. So who is education working for? It's working for our middle class and our higher income families. So increasing the wages to $15 an hour, which is still not a living wage, we need to do things to help our families get out of poverty. That's what we need to do to be more efficient.
You know, Dad, this brings back memories of when Governor Martinez took office. You were on a task force to right-size and reinvent state government. And we had a heck of a plan. I remember those interim hearings and putting a plan together to not lay off public employees, but to shift public employees to better jobs and better agencies and reduce the number of agencies we had in government, at the same time reallocating our resources. And it goes back to investing in our public employees. You know, we talk a lot about pay. We haven't talked a lot about benefits for employees. You know, employees now in their health insurance are paying not only more in premiums, but on their deductibles and co-payments. So their take-home pay, to begin with, when they go home, on top of the deductibles and the co-payments, they're seeing reductions in salaries. We're not investing in our employees. The other thing that in my 25 years in government, state government does a horrible job in not training and developing our employees. We used to have a training academy. Some of you folks remember this. Training academy over on Pacheco Street, where we used to send our public employees for different types of training in their particular jobs and help them develop into being good career public employees. We don't have that anymore. I tried to do that, to reinvent that when I was working for Governor Richardson as state personnel director. The idea didn't even get off the launch pad with the administration or with the cabinet. So it goes back to making, yeah, we can talk about making government efficient, but we've got to invest in our employees and believe in our employees and instill confidence back into them. That when they come into public service like I did, it means something. And we're going to care about them by sending them to training and train them and develop them to be good model career public employees.
Back to Jeff, Paul, and Linda. The governor of New Mexico is a firm Republican. Each year, the session gets deadlocked with partisan fighting. What is your experience crossing party lines? How will you get the governor to sign your bills into law?
Well, under this governor, I don't know. You know, when I worked for the district attorney system, mid part of my career, I remember when the current governor was a district attorney. And even she was a Republican then, district attorney down in Doña Ana County, and I was working for the administrative office of the courts. And just from a personal relationship with Susana Martinez, today I just see a totally different person. I think what's happened here is that the Republican Party, the Republican National Committee, all those Republican strategists that she has in the governor's office have warped her mind. You know, she doesn't have that compassion anymore that she did as a district attorney. She had it. You know, to answer the question, you know, her chief of staff, I don't have a lot of confidence in that person either. So it's kind of like a dead-end street with this administration. You know, you got to collaborate, I think, with the Republican leadership. I would hope and expect the Republican leadership in both houses to have some influence with this governor. Because if there's, for example, if there's bipartisan legislation that goes to the governor, I would expect leadership of the Republican Party and the Republican sponsors of that legislation to be, and I'll go hand in hand with them, up to the governor's office and battle and hopefully convince and collaborate with the governor to sign the bill, to sign any legislation. You know, this party politics is really getting us nowhere in this state, and the prime example of that is in this current governor's office. Thank you.
What we have in the country is ideological gridlock. We have two viewpoints that are diametrically opposed. One is being driven by big corporations in this country who want to run this country. They really want to run America. And Reagan said it. He said government is not the solution, it's the problem. This is actually exactly the wrong answer. Community politics is nothing more than our effort as a community to make decisions. Government is a tool for community to make decisions. We make our own decisions, not corporate America. That ideology is harming America all the way to the core. We have to deal with it as Democrats. As I said earlier, we're family. We have a lot in common, and we have to be aware of what they're doing. Now, limited agenda. Yes, with Governor Martinez, there may be a few things we can talk about. I think there's some Republicans who are smart and good and want to do the right thing. Maybe we don't agree completely on stuff, but I think I can talk to a lot of Republicans who are really fair-minded and really want to do the right thing. One thing I would point out is that the Ethics Commission, I support that. It was proposed by a Republican, Jim Dines. I think it's good, it's right. We're one of 5 states that does not have an Ethics Commission. People, when they talk about businesses coming to New Mexico, they say, hey, there's corruption, there's cronyism. The study says we're the 5th most corrupt state in the whole country, and because of the cronyism, we don't want to do business in New Mexico. We really have to get our act together here in Mexico. Our political culture has to improve.
So would anybody be willing to donate to a pizza and Coke fund? Just saying. As a member of the school board, I participate in the New Mexico School Board Association. And I work with 89 school districts around the state. And of course, many of those are Republican school districts, very conservative, right-leaning school districts. But I have been awarded in 2014 the New Mexico School Board Member of the Year. And that was from my peers from around the state. And the reason is because I sit down and I talk and I try to find commonalities. What is it that we want to achieve? Is it that we want to achieve a high quality education? Is it that we want to open up and provide access to community colleges? Is it that we want to have more economic development? What is the outcome that we want to achieve? And then walk backwards to figure out how we get there. We first have to determine that we agree on what the outcome is. And I think that many of our citizens from around the state want the same outcomes. They want to have a world-class education system. They want to have jobs for their children so that they can stay here. They want a government that is transparent, that they can trust in, that they know will not be squandering their money. They want their communities to be safe. We all want many of the same things. The idea is just how do we get there? And so breaking ourselves out of this idealism that we know, we have to find common grounds. And I have demonstrated that. I'm now currently the president-elect of the New Mexico School Board Association. And I think we need to have common ground.
So before we go on to the next question, Willie has something he wants to say.
Oh, and what do I have to say? I'd like to turn this hat green. If you guys would like to give us a couple of dollars to help us make our party better and work on our candidates, I would appreciate it. So
It's our ways of keeping the doors open, the
correct.
lights
Keeping our
on,
staff.
keeping the telephone going, and keeping our wonderful Francesca.
There you go.
I'm going to go, this is going to be the last question, because of the time frame that we're at, and then we're going to go into
Maybe
our
we should get up and
closing
do a little
statements.
dance for them, sing a song. You guys want to sing a song while they're passing? Come on.
So our last question, as representative of District 48, how will you best serve all working families in bringing in more jobs, better education for our children, and providing affordable housing?
Could you say that question again? I'm sorry. There was quite a few
Absolutely,
pieces.
I know there's a lot of background noise right now. As representative of District 48, how will you best serve all working families in bringing in more jobs, better educating our children, and providing affordable housing?
Okay, that's three different things, so let me see if I can address them really quickly. In regards to education, I think I've demonstrated Santa Fe is is the fastest improving district in the state. Our graduation rates are going up, while the rest of the state's graduation rates are going down. We need to invest in our teachers, we need to invest in our children. And the way we do that is to ensure that they have access to the materials that they need. In regards to jobs, we've already talked about that a little bit. I do believe that we need to invest in the infrastructure of broadband. And investing in broadband will expand the job market. We are not a state that is industrial driven. In other words, we don't have the water resources to have big box. We don't even like big box units here. So what we need to have is we need to invest in cottage industries. And the only way that we can do that is to have the internet accessibility so that those businesses can work and live in our communities. In regards to affordable housing, I think there's some things that we can do to help out with affordable housing. And what we need to do here in Santa Fe particularly is that we need to build more housing. We need to build more housing. We don't have enough housing. We have overpopulated and not enough homes for people to move into. And that's why we have such a high market, because you can't get something here. You can't get an apartment because they fill up so quickly. So we need to invest in construction. And again, if that means that we have some tax breaks for construction industries, for building trades, then that's what we need to do.
Good question. When it comes to jobs, folks, and I said this earlier, we need to take care of our current jobs that exist in this community, in District 48 and in Santa Fe. State employee jobs, local businesses. When I think of jobs, a number of politicians and candidates talk about, we need to create more jobs. And if I get in the legislature, I'm going to be in the front lines creating jobs. Legislators by themselves don't create jobs, folks. We set public policy to help in that process. But what brings people to communities, you know, we could say build more houses, but do you know how much the price of land is here in Santa Fe to put houses on? I went to an open house down on Agua Fria a few weeks ago with my wife. Open house, 1,200 square feet maybe in it. $244,000 for the house. And they're calling that affordable housing here in Santa Fe, folks. So the price of real estate here in Santa Fe is what drives up housing. Folks, quality of life brings business to Santa Fe. Jobs, education. When we talk of quality of life, I think of, look at the city of Santa Fe is $15 to $20 million in deficit. They can't take care of the current infrastructure needs here in Santa Fe. You folks know the condition of our streets out there. That's what brings people to work in Santa Fe. That's what brings people, keeps people, like our children, to stay in Santa Fe. Our educational system. But just advocating and saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to create jobs, folks, by itself. We've got to roll up our sleeves from a policy perspective and work with the business community in this town. The chambers of commerce to create jobs and sustain jobs here in Santa Fe.
The question is really a broad question. It involves all issues almost. As I stated earlier, what we need to do to have jobs is a great educational system. Without that, we will never have the investment in this community. We will never attract the businesses that will provide us with high-paying jobs. Our kids will continue to leave our community, and that's the great tragedy. It is happening, and when I go door to door talking to people, they talk about their kids not being able to stay. In New Mexico, our economy is hurting. We need to establish a strong educational system because the nexus, that connection between education and jobs is totally critical. If we don't do that, we don't get our act together. Water security. If we don't have water security here, we're not going to be able to attract businesses that want to invest in New Mexico because we're not going to be able to say, hey, in 2050, there's going to be water here. We have to go into water reuse and water conservation plans big time. It has to be a priority, not just an afterthought. Density. How do we plan our cities? You know, we have planned our cities around the automobile for centuries, and it's not the right way to plan a city. We need affordable housing, we need more density. We really need more density along arterials so that we can have good public transportation to move people to work, to home, to shopping. It's going to require us to rethink the way we design and think of our cities. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So we're going to move over to our closing statements. You will have 3 minutes for your closing statement. The order is going to be Paul, to Linda, to Jeff.
Thank you, Victoria. I want to start off by saying we're family. We Democrats are a family. Regardless of what happens here, we have basic values that we share. And we have to work together. If we work together, we can get a lot done. So let's not start fighting amongst ourselves after the presidential. Let's not start fighting ourselves after this election. Jeff's my brother. Linda's my sister. I'm proud of them. I'll start off by saying this. I have gotten some important endorsements from the Sierra Club. It's one of the most prestigious groups here. Also from the Voter Conservation Group of New Mexico. These are what I call merit-based endorsements. They have endorsed me because of the work I did as a county commissioner from 2001 to 2008. Conservation voters said that my record from 2001 to 2008 was outstanding. And I'm proud of that endorsement. We've talked about just about all the issues: education, water security, broadband, the movies, tourism. So all I really want to ask here, I want to say, we need somebody who can do the big jobs. I've proven that I can do some heavy lifting, the Buckman, the fracking, the annexation. I ask you for the opportunity to be in the legislature and use these skills and my commitment to getting things done. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that compliment, and I agree. The three of us are Democrats. What we have a responsibility to do is we have a responsibility to make sure that we elect a Democrat for president. The dysfunction that we see on our TVs has driven many of us to even stop watching the news, stop watching what's happening. And now we see that there's one candidate left on the Republican side, and that candidate would be a disaster for us, a disaster. So we have to unite together, and we've got to make sure that we take back the House, we've got to make sure that we take back Congress, and we've got to make sure that we take the presidency for another 8 years. So we have talked about a lot of things. I do think that we need to invest in economic development, and I think we need to do that in the same respect that we've invested in tourism. I think we need to invest more in education. I believe that we need to make sure that workers' rights are protected. We need to raise the minimum wage. We need to tie it to the economy. We need to make sure that women's rights are protected. And we need to invest time in passing ethics reform. But in my mind, ethics reform is not just related to campaign financing. It's not just related to how legislators or elected officials behave. It's also related to the State Rules Act. I've worked for the last 5 years to try to amend the State Rules Act so that agencies who make rules that impact each and every one of us on a daily basis have a responsibility to do that in the light of day. We are the only state that has an Administrative Procedures Act that literally nobody has to follow. There's no standard for public notice. There's no standard for having public comment. These are the things that we need to change, and I will work very hard to do that. I will also work hard to amend the Public Records Act, because we have an administration who's made a across-the-board decision that most all emails are transient, and that means that they can delete them almost immediately. That's not okay. Now, do I think we have an Edward Snowden in our mix? No, I don't. But I do think that the public has a right to see emails, and they have a right to inspect public records, and we need to make sure that that's protected. Thank you very much for being here, and I humbly ask for your support and your vote on June 7th.
Folks, when I look out into the audience, thinking about how I'm going to close, my closing remarks, and I look at my friend in the back there, Steve Baca. And Steve and I grew up in the same neighborhood many, many years ago. I'm not going to say how many years, Steve, to give away our age, but Steve's a 27, 28-year educator here in Santa Fe. Steve, Steve and I went to Santa Fe High, played baseball together, and Steve is the community. Steve is a reflection of the community. There's other folks out here, all of you. That's why I'm running for this seat. Because who's going to be the voice while all this economic development gets off the ground and starts going on? Who's going to take care of the inner city? Who's going to represent our people in the legislature when all this development matures? And take care of the roads and provide capital outlay to all our free out. And to take care of all these homeowner associations in the district. Folks, I want to be that person. That's why I'm running. We talk about endorsements. Folks, I'm not going to come up here and you know who my endorsees are? Local business people like Mark Brandt, who owns Capital Ford, J.R. Palermo over here at Tiny's Lounge, Joe Grenade, who owns Santa Fe Paws, Harold Dixon and Al Padilla that worked at the State Employees Credit Union, Nicole Castellano that runs Christine's Bridal Shop. These are generational businesses here in Santa Fe. I'm proud to say they're endorsing me. I'm not gonna win this race. I don't lead the race, and I'm not gonna win the race on contributions like my opponents. My contributions come from families and individuals. $50, $100, some cases maybe even $200. That makes me proud, folks, because I know the people out there that are supporting me. And let me say this about the Democratic Party. This symbol back here doesn't say progressive Democrat, regressive Democrat, moderate Democrat, any of those flavors of Democrat that some people like to call themselves. Because when I think of being a Democrat, I think of the Democrats that influenced my life in politics. My father, of course, Senator Eddie Lopez, Senator Nancy Rodriguez, Fabian Chavez, John F. Kennedy, Harry Truman. Folks, those are Democrats. We need patriotism in this country, folks. We need to quit dividing ourselves about being progressive, moderate, all these flavors. Because that's not, if I get elected, I'm not going to the Capitol with that attitude. I'm here to represent traditional Santa Fe, traditional families, and traditional values. That's what Jet Varela is about. I would appreciate your support and your vote.